Eighth chapter, Part 2. "These are all very strange circumstances," said Mr. Utterson, "but I think I begin to see daylight. Your master, Poole, is plainly seized with one of those maladies that both torture and deform the sufferer. Hence, for aught I know, the alteration of his voice. Hence, the mask and the avoidance of his friends. Hence, his eagerness to find this drug, by means of which the poor soul retains some hope of ultimate recovery. God grant that he be not deceived. There is my explanation. It is sad enough, Poole, and appalling to consider, but it is plain and natural, hangs well together, and delivers us from all exorbitant alarms." "Sir," said the butler, turning to a sort of mottled pallor, "that thing was not my master, and there's the truth. My master," here he looked round him and began to whisper, "is a tall, fine built of a man, and this was more of a dwarf." Utterson attempted to protest. "Oh, sir," cried Poole, "do you think I do not know my master after 20 years? Do you think I do not know where his head comes to in the cabinet door, where I saw him every morning of my life? No, sir, that thing in the mask was never Dr. Jekyll. God knows what it was, but it was never Dr. Jekyll, and it is the belief of my heart that there was murder done." "Poole," replied the lawyer, "if you say that, it will become my duty to make certain. Much as I desire to spare your master's feelings, much as I am puzzled by this note, which seems to prove him to be still alive, I shall consider it my duty to break in that door." "Ah, Mr. Utterson, that's talking," cried the butler. "And now comes the second question," resumed Utterson. "Who is going to do it?" "Why, you and me, sir," was the undaunted reply. "That's very well said," returned the lawyer. "And whatever comes of it, I shall make it my business to see you are no loser." "There is an axe in the theatre," continued Poole, "and you might take the kitchen poker for yourself." The lawyer took that rude but weighty instrument into his hand and balanced it. "Do you know, Poole," he said, looking up, "that you and I are about to place ourselves in a position of some peril?" "You may say so, sir, indeed," returned the butler. "It is well, then, that we should be frank," said the other. "We both think more than we have said. Let us make a clean breast. This masked figure that you saw, did you recognize it?" "Well, sir, it went so quick, and the creature was so doubled up that I could hardly swear to that," was the answer. "But if you mean, was it Mr. Hyde? Why, yes, I think it was. You see, it was much of the same bigness, and it had the same quick, light way with it. And then who else could have got in by the laboratory door? You have not forgot, sir, that at the time of the murder he had still the key with him. But that's not all. I don't know, Mr. Utterson, if you ever met this Mr. Hyde?" "Yes," said the lawyer. "I once spoke with him." "Then you must know as well as the rest of us that there was something queer about that gentleman, something that gave a man a turn. I don't know rightly how to say it, sir, beyond this, that you felt in your marrow kind of cold and thin." "I own I felt something of what you describe," said Mr. Utterson. "Quite so, sir," returned Poole. "Well, when that masked thing like a monkey jumped from among the chemicals and whipped into the cabinet. It went down my spine like ice. Oh, I know it's not evidence, Mr. Utterson. I'm book-learned enough for that. But a man has his feelings, and I give you my Bible word it was Mr. Hyde." "Aye," said the lawyer. "My fears incline to the same point. Evil, I fear, founded. Evil was sure to come of that connection. Truly, I believe you. I believe poor Harry is killed, and I believe his murderer, for what purpose God alone can tell, is still lurking in his victim's room. Well, let our name be Vengeance. Call Bradshaw." The footman came at the summons, very white and nervous. "Pull yourself together, Bradshaw," said the lawyer. "This suspense, I know, is telling upon all of you, but it is now our intention to make an end of it. Poole here and I are going to force our way into the cabinet. If all is well, my shoulders are broad enough to bear the blame. Meanwhile, lest anything should really be amiss, or any malefactor seek to escape by the back, you and the boy must go round the corner with a pair of good sticks and take your post at the laboratory door. We give you 10 minutes to get to your stations." As Bradshaw left, the lawyer looked at his watch. "And now, Poole, let us get to ours," he said, and taking the poker under his arm, led the way into the yard. The scud had banked over the moon, and it was now quite dark. The wind, which only broke in puffs and draughts into that deep well of building, tossed the light of the candle to and fro about their steps, until they came into the shelter of the theatre, where they sat down silently to wait. London hummed solemnly all around, but nearer at hand the stillness was only broken by the sound of a footfall moving to and fro along the cabinet floor. "So it will walk all day, sir," whispered Poole. "Aye, and the better part of the night. Only when a new sample comes from the chemist, there's a bit of a break. It's an ill conscience that such an enemy to rest. Sir, there's blood foully shed in every step of it. But hark again, a little closer. Put your heart in your ears, Mr. Utterson, and tell me, is that the doctor's foot?" The steps fell lightly and oddly, with a certain swing, for all they went so slowly. It was different, indeed, from the heavy creaking tread of Henry Jekyll. Utterson sighed. "Is there never anything else?" he asked. Poole nodded. "Once," he said, "once I heard it weeping." "Weeping? How that?" said the lawyer, conscious of a sudden chill of horror. "Weeping like a woman or a lost soul," said the butler. "I came away with that upon my heart, that I could have wept too." But now the 10 minutes drew to an end. Poole disinterred the axe from under a stack of packing straw. The candle was set upon the nearest table to light them to the attack, and they drew near with bated breath to where that patient foot was still going up and down in the quiet of the night. "Jekyll," cried Utterson with a loud voice, "I demand to see you." He paused a moment, but there came no reply. "I give you fair warning. Our suspicions are aroused, and I must and shall see you," he resumed. If not by fair means, then by foul. If not of your consent, then by brute force.
Utterson,
said the voice,
for God's sake, have mercy.
Ah, that's not Jekyll's voice. It's Hyde's, cried Utterson. Down with the door, Poole. Poole swung the axe over his shoulder. The blow shook the building, and the red baize door leaped against the lock and hinges. A dismal screech, as of mere animal terror, rang from the cabinet. Up went the axe again, and again the panels crashed, and the frame bounded. 4 times the blow fell. But the wood was tough, and the fittings were of excellent workmanship, and it was not until the 5th that the lock burst, and the wreck of the door fell inwards on the carpet. The besiegers, appalled by their own riot, and the stillness that had succeeded, stood back a little and peered in. There lay the cabinet before their eyes in the quiet lamplight, a good fire glowing and chattering on the hearth, the kettle singing its thin strain, a drawer or 2 open, papers neatly set forth on the business table, and nearer the fire the things laid out for tea. The quietest room, you would have said, and but for the glazed presses full of chemicals, the most commonplace that night in London. Right in the middle there lay the body of a man, sorely contorted and still twitching. They drew near on tiptoe, turned it on its back, and beheld the face of Edward Hyde. He was dressed in clothes far too large for him, clothes of the doctor's bigness. The cords of his face still moved with a semblance of life, but life was quite gone, and by the crushed phial in the hand and the strong smell of kernels that hung upon the air, Utterson knew that he was looking on the body of a self-destroyer. "We have come too late," he sternly said, "whether to save or punish. Hyde is gone to his account, and it only remains for us to find the body of your master." The far greater proportion of the building was occupied by the theatre, which filled almost the whole ground story, and was lighted from above, and by the cabinet, which formed an upper story at one end and looked upon the court. A corridor joined the theatre to the door on the by-street, and with this the cabinet communicated separately by a second flight of stairs. There were besides a few dark closets and a spacious cellar. All these they now thoroughly examined. Each closet needed but a glance, for all were empty, and all by the dust that fell from their doors had stood long unopened. The cellar, indeed, was filled with crazy lumber, mostly dating from the times of the surgeon who was Jekyll's predecessor, but even as they opened the door, they were advertised of the uselessness of further search by the fall of a perfect mat of cobweb which had for years sealed up the entrance. Nowhere was there any trace of Henry Jekyll, dead or alive. So I have to stop for today. Bye-bye. Till next time with the next part of this chapter.